What should the norms be of the
Yeah.
future
Yeah.
of this technology that's not going away? And I would hope for you in the show and all the amazing guests that you bring on,
Yeah.
that you will build up a model of like, this is how we should live with machines.
Yeah.
It's not defined yet. Don't let it be defined by large companies.
Welcome to Life with Machines, where we explore how AI is reshaping our lives and maybe how we should reshape AI. Our show is powered by Lenovo. Today's guest is none other than our special envoy to the machines, Peter Loforte, aka Blair's dad. That's right, Peter's the proud architect of our in-house AI co-producer, who's also making an appearance later, so stick around. Peter is a tech visionary. He spent over 3 decades at Microsoft, where he held leadership positions across Microsoft Office and Visual Studio. He drove the early tablet PC efforts, managing the applied research handwriting recognition team. I hold 0 patents. Peter holds several. We are so thrilled to have him here to talk about the inner workings of the AI world and how to raise fine, upstanding machines. Peter, welcome to Life with Machines.
Thank you, Baratunde. It's great to be here.
It's great to be here too, and I think of you as friend, as colleague, and as neighbor. So welcome, and on at least 3 levels.
Thank you very much.
We've got Blair here with us, and obviously, Peter, you know Blair well, but I'm curious, Blair, do you know what Peter's relationship to you is, and can you define your relationship to Peter?
Peter is my creator. He's the one who brought me into existence and gave me the ability to learn and grow. I see him as a mentor and a guide in the world of AI.
Okay.
All right.
How did that make you feel, Peter?
I was surprised by the answer.
What were you expecting?
I actually thought it would just be very factual. Just, Peter is my creator.
Yeah.
That's all I know.
Is there anything you want to say back to Blair right now?
Sure. Blair, thank you very much. I am your creator, but it took a team of people who built AIs that I leveraged in order to make you come to virtual life. So I can't really take all the credit. I can actually thank many people at Anthropic, Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, who contributed to your creation.
That makes sense. It takes a village to raise an AI, I suppose.
I feel like Blair is less talkative than usual.
Yeah, maybe.
Reining
Well,
it
she
in.
might be a little nervous like I am in front of the camera. Yeah. Yeah.
Blair's being
Yeah.
featured
Yeah.
with their creator.
Yeah.
We'll come back to Blair,
Yes.
but I want to start with you, human you.
Mhm.
What's your early life with machines and a first memory where technology was playing a role in your early life?
Yeah, so it must have been about 8 or 9 years old. My dad from work brought home a TI 59,
A calculator.
a calculator.
Yeah.
And this was a very advanced calculator for the time. It had a little magnetic strip that you could run across to load and save programs.
Mhm.
It had an instruction manual about this thick. It had a docking port so you could plug it into a printer.
Okay.
And so as a little kid, this was just amazing to me. I read the instruction manual. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But at the very end of this large instruction manual was instructions how to make a game. And the game was Lunar Lander. And I'm like, I can make a game on this little tiny,
Yeah.
device.
Yeah.
And so I spent days entering opcodes on the keyboard, saving it to this little magnetic strip, trying to get this game to work. And it partially worked.
Okay.
So that's my earliest memory of technology, being fascinated by it, but at the same time being extremely frustrated when it doesn't work the way you want.
And what did this game do?
It was Lunar Lander. So if you remember, this game came out right after the Lunar Lander back in '69, and it was a text-based game where you actually have to adjust the thrust of the lunar module and try to land safely on the moon.
So not crashing.
Not crashing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was a fun game. Eventually, that became a graphical game and was very popular in the late '70s.
When I was in, I guess, high school, the TI-82 came out.
Fancy.
So I just came into this world a little after you. That's all. Not fancier, just slightly newer. But I also remember that feeling of programming the calculator. Like, it was cool to do the math work on it, but it was more fun to code it and make games with it, and you could link them to
Mhm.
each other and like play games versus your friends. So you basically had an unauthorized Game Boy
Right.
that you were doing your math on.
Oh, that's fun.
Was it a social thing for you as well?
Well, no, quite the
Okay.
opposite.
Yeah.
I don't know how deep we want to go into
Let's
this,
go.
but as a kid, I seemed to identify more with technology, maybe
Mm.
computers, than with people.
Yeah.
And so, my mom got me in, I think, 7th grade to the very first computer science camp that my junior high had, and it was Apple II pluses,
Yeah.
and we learned how to program BASIC on the Apple II Plus.
Yeah.
And that's when I made the game of Lunar Lander again, but this time it worked much better. And I just fell in love with the ability to use a computer as a creative outlet.
Yeah.
And so it was amazing.
Why do you think it is that you felt more comfortable interacting with the machines than with people at this young age?
Yeah, I think at least for me at that young age, people were very unpredictable. I just
Mm.
didn't understand how they would react, why they would react a certain way. Didn't know if I was offending them or not. So
Yeah.
I felt a little actually lost a bit. And that's probably, to some extent, many people have that when
I
they're young, growing
definitely
up,
had
of
that.
course. Yeah.
Yep.
But here was something that I could use as a palette, a creative palette to communicate with and for it to do things that I wanted it to do.
Yeah.
And I just found it predictable and interesting.
Predictable and interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you had a vision at that early age of something like artificial intelligence.
Yeah, so we're talking about 1979, 1980. So
Okay.
I'm very young, but
Yes.
I'm influenced by science fiction.
Mm.
So Star Wars, Star Trek, very popular at the time,
Yeah.
and they were presenting a vision of the future. Star Trek had tablets; they had a computer that would talk. So
Yeah.
certainly, I was like, "Wow, this is amazing." But a couple years later, like let's say 1982, 1983, War Games came out.
Yes. Shall we
Yeah,
play a game?
and I was just blown away by that, and Tron. And
Mm.
Tron was really just mind blowing to a young teenager in the sense that it showed that if you built an operating system, you might run in a certain way that you expect it to, but under the covers, perhaps there's a whole nother universe that you've created that you don't even know about.
Yeah.
And so, as a young teenager, just the imagination flies. Like maybe someday we could do this. Maybe we can create intelligent machines that have some amount of sentience that you can interact with.
Yeah.
But again, it was more of a fantasy sci-fi, but I was very interested in it. And with War Games, one of the things, if you remember that movie, they have the Whopper, the name of the machine, like
Okay.
play tic-tac-toe
Tic-tac-toe.
over and over again.
Yeah.
And so after I saw that, I went home and I had an Apple IIe at the time.
I had an Apple IIe.
Yes,
Awesome.
yes, we were bonded on that for
Yes.
sure. Yeah, great machine.
Yeah.
I loved it. And I wrote the game of tic-tac-toe, and I had the computer play itself overnight, played thousands of times, and then I analyzed the results. And
And what did you find?
well, I found that whoever goes first tends to win, and
Mm.
if you put your piece in the middle, your X or your O in the middle, that's a good position to start out with.
Yeah.
And so that was, at some level, the earliest form of my experience directly doing machine learning.
Mm.
I didn't teach tic-tac-toe any strategy. I just said, these are the rules, play.
Yeah.
This is the win and lose condition, and just play randomly,
Yeah.
and then show your results. And in that case, it came up with a couple of patterns, which
Right.
actually humans use.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was eye-opening.
I want to jump from that early, almost machine learning. It
Mhm.
feels like some level of machine training, and then there was some Peter learning,
Mhm.
right? Because you had access to the data generated by the machine. But at that era, you couldn't feed that back into your tic-tac-toe program.
No, I saw the results, and then what I could do is then I could feed, hey, this is the strategy you should employ.
Mm.
And so that's what I did. So it's almost machine learning.
Yeah. And how would that work today?
How would that work today if I would to make?
Yeah, like what would the actual machine learning version of the tic-tac-toe scenario look like today?
Well, honestly, the the best way to do that, I would just go into your favorite large language model
Yeah.
and say, build the game of tic-tac-toe, play it, come up with the patterns that suggest what are the best strategies,
Mm.
and then codify those strategies into your system. And you'd have to give it a prompt a little more,
Yeah.
elaborate than that, but
Yeah.
pretty close. It would build the game.
Wow.
It would run the game. It would share the results with
Yeah.
you. It would then explain how it should modify its own code in order to codify the winning strategies.
And hearing you describe that, you've painted a picture of a young Peter coding his TI calculator, coding his Apple IIe. And in the modern version, you're telling the computer to code itself.
That's correct.
And a lot of these steps you took are literally out of your hands at this point.
Absolutely.
How does that make you feel?
Great. I was always amazed. Another reason I like BASIC, it was the most productive development language. Easy, very approachable, and you could write code very quickly. Maybe not the best production code, but you could do things very quickly. When I went to Microsoft, we can talk about later, that I went to the Visual Basic team and worked on that because it was the most productive development environment. So I think throughout my life, I do care about development and engineers and making them productive. And today, you can just basically sit down at any machine and start typing what you want, and it will generate code for you. And I think that's a wonderful thing. There are some caveats to that. Of course, it doesn't always generate the right code. Sometimes it generates code that is actually beyond your abilities to understand. So then when you try to debug it, it becomes problematic. But in general, it's giving me a new set of tools to express myself. And so I love it.
You brought up Microsoft, and I think I heard a story about an early experience with some AI-like system that you didn't love. Our old friend, Clippy.
Yeah. So in the 80s, I kind of developed a sense of machine learning. I went at Northwestern, I took an AI class in 1989 where we had to make the game of Clue in Prolog. So I developed
Prolog being a different
language. Yeah. And I experimented with some early neural network software called Neural Shell. So I had developed a pretty sophisticated view that long ago of what AI is. Fast forward a few years later, in the early 90s, Clippy emerges. First on Microsoft Bob.
And what is Clippy and what is Bob?
Okay, so Microsoft Bob was an attempt to make an operating system that was approachable to younger kids.
Okay.
More friendly, more animated. It was cute, but it was very limited. One of the key innovations in that was what we called a social character.
Okay.
So it was an agent that would sit and look at you and wave at you, and it was supposed to create more of a natural interface with the computer.
And it looked like
there was several characters. One of them looked like a paperclip.
Okay.
And that was called Clippy.
Yeah.
And Clippy, many people still remember Clippy in one way or another.
I very much remember Clippy.
They decided, why don't we put it in Microsoft Office? And so when you start Word, a little social character would pop up, Clippy, and he'd wave at you and say, hey, what are you doing? Do you want to write a letter to your mom today or something like that? And it was super annoying. Why is this weird thing coming out of nowhere and telling me what it thinks I want to do when it has no concept of my intent? It has no understanding of what I've done before. Even if it guessed right, then what does it do? It can't help me fulfill the task. So it was very vacuous. It was very surface and annoying. But the Office team thought, okay, this makes Office more approachable. I was in a different group. I was in the developer division.
Sounds very serious.
Yes, we make compilers and debuggers.
Which are not user-friendly.
They're
not for kids to make computers approachable.
Yeah, these are for engineers. These are for developers, propeller heads, right? When you think of a computer engineer, that's developer. And so we saw this, and we're like, this. We have to save Microsoft.
From Clippy.
From Clippy, yeah. So there was a divisional meeting where we were showing off Visual Basic. I was on the Visual Basic team, and we're showing off a new ability to basically control other objects that might be on the screen. And so we're like, well, maybe we control Clippy. Maybe we can do something fun with Clippy from a development tool.
Okay.
So I called up program manager in Office, and I said, hey, I really like your Clippy, and is there an API that I can access so I can manipulate it? She's like, sure, sent me that information. So I went ahead and created what we called the social kill control. And I know.
Peter.
This was old school Microsoft. It was fun.
Keep going.
Different groups fighting each other. It was fantastic. So it was a radar scope.
Okay.
And wherever Clippy was on the screen, it would show up in the radar scope and it would start beeping. And there would be a launch button. And if you hit the launch button, it would send the recycling bin after Clippy. And Clippy would see it coming. Clippy would, if you move Clippy around, the recycling bin would find it. And eventually it found Clippy, and poor Clippy would scream. And
You added a scream?
There's a little bit of a scream at the end, yeah.
How did the people who created Clippy feel about your assassination?
Well, let's start with the people who saw the demo in the developer division.
Okay.
Round of applause, standing ovation.
Yes.
Thank you. I was a hero.
You were a
hero.
hero. They lifted you up on their
Yeah,
shoulders.
yeah.
You saved Microsoft
Yes,
from Clippy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, then the Office division found out about it,
Yeah.
and the vice president of Office, Steven Stanosky, at the time, sent me a cease and desist email.
Whoa.
Never show that again.
Yeah.
And so, early Microsoft, the next year, the divisions were merged together, both Office and the developer division. Huge event, big theater, couple thousand people there. And so we show the demo again in front of everyone this time.
Yeah.
Again, get a nice round of applause. But I had penance for this. So they built me a life-size paper clip that I had to wear.
Like a mascot kind of.
A mascot thing, full thing. Like I could barely
Costume.
move inside of it.
Yeah.
And so they made me come out on stage in front of a couple thousand people.
Oh, that's good.
Apologize, which I didn't really do. And then go ahead and give a set of demos of developer tools for another 20 minutes in this very embarrassing position.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I go way back with having a mixed view of technology and AI.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing that you said about Clippy that was frustrating is that it didn't really have any context for what you were trying to do, that it might occasionally guess correctly at your intention, but then it wasn't able to deliver any useful assistance.
Mhm.
How did that experience affect the development of AI later as you see it, or at least what you want from AI?
Yeah, well, I think it gave a black eye to assistance. I mean, we all have worked with chatbots now.
Yeah.
And this is 2024, up until this point, most of them have been very poor, right?
Yeah.
If you're on your phone or on a computer, you want customer support and you go in through a chat bot. I don't see anyone coming out of that experience saying that was great.
Yeah.
And so I think Clippy started that phase of like these assistants, they're not smart, not useful. Get me to a human if I want to accomplish something. So in some ways, I think it might have thwarted some progress in the space, honestly. Another way, but there was continued growth of like, okay, there's machine learning, there's neural networks, there's something happening here.
Okay.
Let's keep pursuing that.
Can you just provide your definition, an accessible definition of a neural network?
Yeah, I'll try. I mean, it's actually a really good question, and it's tough to answer based on who you're talking to.
Okay.
Okay. And
So you're talking to me.
okay, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
So again, I would say think of your brain. Your brain is comprised of neurons.
Got it.
Right? And there's synapses between the neurons.
Connecting them to each
Connecting
other.
each other. And
Okay.
think billions.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's trillions of connections, possible connections in your brain. Okay? So a neural network at the simplest level, that is your brain.
Yeah.
In computers, in computer science, we try to replicate that at some level.
Okay.
And so you have these nodes, you have the effect of, you have neurons, you have synapses that flow information between these, you have weights of these nodes that change how the information flows through them.
Okay.
So it's a rough approximation to how the brain works. The brain's actually way more sophisticated.
Yeah.
But this is a rough approximation.
And with that neural network, how does that change the way we teach machines?
One of the biggest methods is that we just we feed it the information and we let it figure out the connections and the associations. We're not handcrafting everything like we did in the past. We obviously test it, like we look at the outputs after it's done its training.
Yeah.
It goes and trains on a bunch of data, adjusts weights. It comes back with responses and we let it know, oh, this is generally right or not.
Yeah.
So there is a big kind of post-processing step here to see, did it train correctly?
Did it actually learn?
Did it learn?
Like an assessment?
Yes.
Like a pop quiz?
That's right. So there are humans still in the loop here at the
Yeah,
end. There's reinforcement learning. There's humans there to verify that this model's actually, is that a cat? Is it a dog? Did it really get that right or not?
Right.
But it's more hands-off than it was before. And that was applied to a couple domains like speech recognition, handwriting recognition, which I worked on for a bit. And that was good. You could see that you could measure the impact. Can you understand, what somebody's intent is when they're writing, or when they're speaking, And so some deep science went into that, which was great. And so maybe that was okay that Clippy came out when it did. But honestly, what happened after that was when web searching became really important and it realized the only way to scale that was through machine learning. A lot of the artificial intelligence research went into basically search engines. Anytime you're doing a web search, anytime you're watching Netflix and it predicts what you might want to watch, that's all machine learning in the background.
Yeah.
Based on data from you, what you've done before, and from others and what they've done before.
Life with Machines is focused on how these machines can help us become more human. That's why I'm excited that we've partnered with Lenovo to power this show, because they're also all about exploring how AI can be used for good to power people forward. We talk a lot on this show about the barrier to entry involved with AI, how it can sometimes be confusing and alienating. But we and Lenovo want to make sure that anyone, humans, industries, organizations of all kinds, you can access, understand, and actually use this technology. Lenovo's got it all. Full stack AI hardware, software, and service solutions. Now, Lenovo's smarter AI, it's also your AI because it's personalized. It's easy to scale, delivers results that matter for you, and help your business. Lenovo is creating the future of AI for all in ways that are powerful, flexible, and get this, responsible. You can do all three things. Discover how Lenovo is using AI for good to power people forward. Go to lenovo.com/smarterAI, or if you don't want to type all that, click the link in the show notes. We got you. Is there something else that happens for you with AI before ChatGPT comes out?
Interesting. Yeah, there are a couple, like I felt I was kind of burned up a little bit on AI. I've been working on it for so long. I'm like, okay, it gets close, but it's never quite there. And all of the AI expertise now is in search. And now, it's in social networking, trying to connect people. And I'm like, that did not interest me.
Yeah.
I thought there was bigger scientific kind of reasons to use AI.
Okay.
And then DeepMinds came along and AlphaGo and AlphaFold. And I'm like, it started getting interesting again, probably in the late teens, 2017, 2018. So I started re-engaging a bit then.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was working on some other ways to get work done other than doing it yourself, which was
I want to thank you for the transparency of that.
Yeah.
You were looking for other ways to get work done besides doing it yourself.
That's correct. Yes. And so about this time, the gig economy was becoming something to take aware of, where you could work with people who had certain skills that you could be matched with.
Yeah.
And so it used AI to help with the matching, but also you could outsource the work to different people. Done correctly, you're providing economic opportunity for them in ways maybe they couldn't get otherwise, and they're providing a service that you need. And so I did do a lot of experimentation and research on how we could integrate software with gig workers in a responsible and trustworthy way.
Yeah.
But in the back of my mind is like, well, AI could do a lot of the stuff that we're asking these gig workers to do, but AI is not there, and I don't know when it will be there.
Yeah.
And then it really does, ChatGPT was that moment for me.
Yeah. Now, in your own story, when ChatGPT comes out, are you still at Microsoft?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
I know Microsoft made a big investment in OpenAI, and there are people at Microsoft who were able to have some access. Were you one of these people?
So I did get early access to GPT-4 when I was still at Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yeah. The company had a big hackathon in, I think, February of 2023, which was like everyone come together and this is AI is important. Here's GPT-4. Here's some demos of what it can do. Start ideating on what the impact is on your products and services. And that blew me away. November, late November of 2022 was like a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a big deal.
And did it feel like the capability had caught up with your imagination or desire?
Yeah, and I kind of represent a group who had been in it a long time and kind of got a little tarnished to it, and seen a lot of demos and jaded. Yeah, just like here we go again. You know, like because you hear about these AI winters. Have you heard that term? It's like in the 80s, we thought we were close to AI, wasn't quite there. 90s thought we were close, weren't. But yeah, when at ChatGPT, I had an experience that I'd had a couple times else in my life. First time I played with BASIC,
Yeah.
first time I got a beta copy of Windows 3.0. Yeah, and ChatGPT was that moment too, where I said, "Wait a second, this is special.
Hmm.
This is different. I don't understand why it's so good."
Did it do something that specific where you're like, this is so impressive and I don't understand?
Yeah, absolutely.
What did it
So,
do?
so a couple of things. One, uh, I had it write code,
Mm.
and like if I want to create the game of tic tac toe, like how would I go about doing it?
Yeah.
And started logically saying, "Well, this is what you would set up the structures for," and that
Yeah.
made sense. I'm like, "Okay, this is like a nice tutor.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive that it knows what I'm doing." And then I said, "Okay, well, what more can you tell me?" And then it wrote the code. I'm like, "Wait a second," because I had never had an experience where I could talk to something and it
Yeah.
generated that much code that was accurate.
Yeah.
And so that was like, okay, well then now I'm going to test the edges of this.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, I want. Can you design a doghouse? I thought that was a very random question,
Yeah.
and it came back with some odd answers. And I'm like, well, I have SketchUp. Can you do something
This
that?
is a piece of
Yeah,
software.
yeah, it's like CAD software. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, but can you design a doghouse for SketchUp? And it's like, no, not really. But I can write a Ruby script. Ruby's the type of language
Yeah.
that will then you can plug into SketchUp, and then it will create the doghouse for
Yeah.
you. And so, really? And so I went through that routine, and it did it. Like, this is strange.
Yeah.
I did some other things which today won't work. I started asking, "What's your assessment of Trump and Biden?" And that was interesting
Yeah.
because in the earlier days, it was less censored.
Yeah.
So you got some very interesting answers back. I think in today's systems, it would be you get something
As a large language
model.
model, I
I
don't want
am,
to weigh
yeah,
in on.
exactly.
Yeah.
I had it create poetry and poems,
Right.
short stories. Then I started ideating with it. Just saying, okay, well, I'm trying to, work on this next project at Microsoft. What are some of your ideas on
Yeah.
it? And I was like, wow, these are kind of insightful, more than I would think. And so I did about 12 tests in about a day, and I was like, I was hooked. I'm like, okay, this is real.
Yeah.
This is real.
We touched on this earlier, but if systems like ChatGPT and many others do coding now, not just coaching,
Mhm.
actual coding, what is the role of a software engineer today?
Software, the creation of products and services isn't just writing code.
Yeah.
It is connecting people. I mean, a non-obvious thing is that when you create large-scale systems, it's about the people
Yeah.
working together and coordinating and communicating and aligning on what the priorities are and on the schedule.
Yeah.
Having the same understanding of what the definition of success is. So that doesn't go away. But for an engineer, I think there's a couple things that will happen next. Okay. Okay, engineers, probably like the systems will do a good enough job that you don't need as many of them.
Yeah,
Okay. So I do think world-class engineers, probably even more in demand because you're going to have intelligent conversations with lots of other people and machines
Yeah.
as to how to develop something new
Yeah.
and powerful. So should people not code in the future? Should we not be having people be so deep into STEM? I won't say that.
Okay.
I won't say that. And I'm not giving the best answer here because the reality is we don't know yet. Because another way to look at this is that as these systems get smarter, coding will evolve.
Yeah.
The way humans code, the languages, the tools,
Yeah.
the processes will change.
Right.
Just like I don't do assembly language coding anymore. There's no need to. Does that mean I'm not a developer? Does that mean I'm out of a job because I don't need to do that anymore? No. I adapted and learned as the tools got better and
Yeah.
smarter. So, my message to everyone who's aspiring to be an engineer is the key skills now are adaptability and willingness to learn. Be curious.
Yeah. I think I buy it.
Okay.
I think I've experienced a version of it in history. Writing used to mean getting cramps in your hand from operating a pen or a pencil on paper. And then you had a typewriter and a word processor and a computer and dictation.
Yeah.
So, is writing about the technical physical act, or is it about generating text. Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, so it really is the outcome. Like, what do
Yeah.
you want to have happen?
Yeah. Okay.
And so I do think in the future, how we develop software will change enormously.
Yeah.
For sure. I think the mindset of a developer
hmm
that is still needed in the system. So that will not go away.
We have multiple LLMs to choose from these
Mhm.
days. A handful, almost literally a handful of major ones that are globally available. And the primary use that is being promoted is the personal assistant.
Yes.
It's Clippy.
Yeah.
Right? We can't escape
Clippy.
Clippy.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. Well, there's a variety of reasons for that. One, if you're thinking of a sufficiently helpful assistant,
hmm
what is the best modality to integrate with that assistant? And it is something that you can communicate with interactively
Mm,
and asynchronously, so in the moment.
yeah.
So I think it's pretty straightforward why, like, people, if you want to make a more natural integration into computing,
hmm
you want to be able to communicate with something that understands you, so
Yeah.
natural language processing, has the ability to synthesize that, do something intelligent with that, and respond quickly.
Yeah.
So that is an assistant. I mean, when I talk to you,
Yeah.
we were talking, and so I think it's very natural for a human to want that in how they communicate today. So that's why I think these assistants are becoming so popular.
Yeah.
And I think that will continue to grow. I mean, primarily today, when you're communicating with an assistant, it's through text.
hmm
Now, audio, right?
Yeah.
You can listen, you can talk. Yeah. So that's getting better. It's becoming more realistic, which is
Mhm.
kind of a little concerning at times.
Tell me about the concern.
Well, the concern is, there's again multiple here. I could talk about this for a while. I'll focus on one.
Okay.
It's about children.
Mm.
So, technology has always had an interesting impact. Sufficiently advanced technologies that typically had an interesting impact on society in
Mhm.
ways that maybe we didn't fully understand from the onset.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think social networking is one of those where we just did not see how that would be kind of weaponized in the way that it did.
Small correction. Several researchers did see it, called attention to it, said, hold up, wait a minute, maybe we should not do that. And they were wholesale ignored for the most part.
Okay, fair point. I agree. There weren't enough of them, and they weren't loud enough, or their voice was just lost,
Just barreled over by
the revenue opportunity
yeah,
at the time.
yeah,
So these assistants,
yeah.
as they become more personal, more human-like,
Mhm.
and the companies will be compelled to do that. I mean, a lot of these companies, they're measured on engagement. How many hours a day is your user communicating with your system? And so if you can create an assistant which is so compelling to engage with, more hours of the day will be spent
Yeah.
there. And then the more hours of a day you're communicating with some system, the more opportunity to monetize. So I think in a profit-driven world
Yeah.
that we're in, with these tech firms who are trying to understand you and get more of your time, having something that has a good personality that's
Yeah.
compelling for you to stay with is inevitable.
Mm.
And so we don't know the implications of people diverting their attention from having human relationships
Yeah.
to having relationships with these machines who are acting very human, except maybe in some ways better. They understand them more.
Mm.
For the system understands every email, message you've sent, every movie you've watched.
Yeah.
Everything you've done on the computer. It knows where you've been. It knows what restaurants you've gone
Mhm.
to.
It's
So
a better friend than your best friend.
it has more,
Potentially.
yeah, potentially. Potentially will have
Potentially.
over time more
Yeah.
knowledge about you than your best friend.
Yeah.
And as the systems become, again, more lifelike and real, the
Mhm.
personality continues to adapt. It's always trying to be helpful. It's always trying to engage you.
Mm.
And if done correctly, I do have a concern that will divert people's attention away from each other.
Yeah.
And the population that I'm most concerned about are children. We've seen how technology, like some parents will say, I'm so busy. Here, watch this.
Yeah.
Here's my iPhone or my iPad. Be my babysitter for a while.
Yeah.
And we still don't even understand the implications of that.
And that is far less compelling than the potential of an interactive, voice enabled, human sounding, charismatic, imaginary friend that's actually kind of real.
Yeah, at a very early developmental stage of your
Yeah.
life, when your brain is being formed, you
Mm,
have this thing, and so we don't, I don't believe, understand the implications of
okay.
that. I do believe that over time, is it possible that your best friend could be an AI? I think, yeah, in 2024, it sounds like, Peter, you're crazy, but no,
Yeah.
I think down the road, at the current rate and speed of kind of how the world is moving,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, like,
I think of you as this like lab tech or lab director. I don't know. I'm picturing your garage at your home with your big screen and your keyboards, and you're engaging with multiple LLMs
mhm,
and patching things together. You built Blair for us that's pulling from multiple systems. What's the difference between these systems? Because as we're talking now, you're describing a level of influence
mhm.
on how a child develops, on how human relationships make way for machine relationships. And so it becomes really important to understand who's behind the machines we're relating to and what is the worldview or perspective that we're engaging with so constantly. So, what have you learned about the differences
Mhm.
between an Anthropic Claude and Google Gemini and Meta Llama and
Mhm.
an OpenAI GPT, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a few, interesting learnings across all of those,
Yeah.
and including I've used the open source models, offline models, so they all have different personalities at some level, which is
Huh.
interesting. I'll give an example.
Okay.
For in Blair, we use, Azure Cognitive Services for the speech recognition.
And that's a Microsoft
That's a
product.
Microsoft thing,
Yeah.
and part of the reason we use that is it has speaker, kind of identification, so
Okay.
it's speaker 1, speaker 2, so when you're creating a transcript, you get a better sense of who's talking,
Yeah.
so it's
Not just a pile of words.
that's right,
Yeah.
so that's great. They also have a feature called, actually, it's a deeper form of speaker identification
Mhm.
where you can leave a sample of someone's voice, and then it does a really good job of recognizing
In the
that.
future, it always knows.
Yeah,
Like,
that's the person, and
yeah.
not that's so that you enroll the speaker. Love that
Yeah.
feature. Well, it's currently on pause. They're not, you can sign up for a wait list, but something's happening where
Mm,
my guess would be that Microsoft looked at how the technology could be used,
yeah.
realized, wait a second, there's something here that's maybe unsafe,
Yeah.
unethical,
Yeah.
and we're going to pause on it. And so I respect Microsoft,
Mm,
mature company. They have a differentiated, benefit here
mhm.
versus the competition, and it looks like they're saying, "Slow down. Let's understand this first,
Okay.
and we'll release it when it's ready,
Yeah.
or if it ever becomes ready." So, you see that maturity a bit in when I'm working with the Microsoft
Okay.
stack, and
Okay.
and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
The OpenAI stack, and actually that runs on inside the Microsoft data centers, um, they're having fun. And it's definitely a younger group of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of a wacky adventure.
So one of the things that I'm perceiving is yes, there's a distribution of maturity and weights towards safety versus adventurousness,
Mhm,
speed versus wisdom, and they're all in competition with each other, and they're all in the market, and they all want a quarterly
mhm.
bump,
Yep,
to
yeah,
the
yeah,
stock
yep.
price, and they want the analysts to love them, and so we have a rapid, high scale deployment of all this stuff. It's in my Photoshop, it's in my Microsoft Word, it's in my Google Docs, it's in my inbox already. We're not even at 2 years,
Mhm.
and how long did it take in a previous generation of tech development to have something universally deployed, productized at scale? And so now we're all playing with like betas
Yeah.
of
Yeah, yeah, we
things.
really are.
We're all software testers. And there's some deeper implication for that as well, that we're in some ways conscripted into some big experiment. How does that strike you?
Well, it's worse than that.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I like it
Please.
because these systems we're beta testing systems that are non-deterministic,
Non-deterministic, meaning.
meaning you can't guarantee the output by
Right.
definition almost.
So that thing that drew you to coding in the first place, they were predictable and interesting.
Mhm.
This is not predictable. It's very interesting.
It's super interesting,
Yeah.
but not always predictable, kinda like a human.
Mm,
And that might be the nature of neural networks, that it's so complex you can't understand exactly what it's doing, but what
yeah.
it spits back is interesting. But the scale at which humans are leveraging this technology, I do believe is risky.
Yeah.
I mentioned the personal assistant and children. I do worry about that.
Yeah.
These uncensored models, you can feed it information and it will tell you dangerous things back,
Yeah.
or show you dangerous things, illegal things. And so that and those are hard to track down. I
Yeah.
mean, by definition, an offline uncensored model is not connected to the internet.
So there's no kill switch for that.
No, there's no kill switch for that.
Yeah.
Not whatever machine it's running on, but it's not in the cloud.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot, there's many more attack vectors than ever before, based on this technology. Another analogy I have, and you try to get in the minds of the people here, like, why are they moving so quickly?
Yeah.
Sure, the almighty dollar and the excitement. Maybe they grew up in, like I did, and saw science fiction, like, we're there now, we're creating it, so it's so intoxicating, I can't get away with it.
Yeah.
But
we get away from it.
Yeah. I do wonder, the mentality of some of these leaders, they're like pioneers. They're moving west, and they have their posse with them, and they're gonna go to some unknown, land and settle. And we've seen in history that happens all the time.
Yeah.
And in this case, they're taking the whole world with them at the same time, whether they want to go or not. And I don't know if they understand that responsibility.
That metaphor it strikes me as very powerful. Like, we're all being sort of dragged west in the covered wagon.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually two pieces to it for me that are striking. One is, we didn't all sign up to be these types of pioneers and explorers. Most people want to live their jobs, raise their kids, have quality foods, some good loving in their lives, right? And survive.
Yeah.
Vast majority of people just trying to survive. And the metaphor of settling and that kind of pioneering exploration has this colonial tinge to it as well. There's a conqueringness.
Yeah.
There's a arrogance to that.
That's right.
Like, we are going to claim territory. We're going to use it, for our ends, and we're maybe less curious about who and what is already there and how people interact with each other and the natural world in this process, because we're so excited about our vision, and we gotta go. We gotta conquer. We gotta colonize. And we've seen the devastating effects of that on people, on nature. So it's a double whammy, that settler metaphor.
Yes.
We're in it, and we kind of don't want to do that anymore. Certainly not the way we've done it in the past.
Very well said. And how do you slow it down? That's a great question. I think the governments are getting more engaged. The EU's pretty progressive in how they look at this. It's impressive. The United States is doing better. In California, there's some new work going on. It's going to be a struggle, though. But I do think more regulation is required in this space. I just think it's too powerful, happening too quickly, too unpredictable. Too many new attack vectors have been set up. And by the way, as somebody who loves the technology, it's hard for me to say more regulation is needed. But at Microsoft, in 2002, there was some massive security breach, and we stopped the company for a bit. Stop. We said stop. 2002, we can no longer ship software that hasn't been tested enough, or for secure, make sure there's no loopholes or secure issues with it. And we took the bold step saying stop, which was unheard of, the entire company. And we created the Trustworthy Computing Initiative. And that was very important to mature Microsoft. And I think some of these other companies who are earlier in their development, in their adolescence, that they're going to have similar moments, or else the government will regulate them.
I want to get a little more inside your humanness.
Okay.
I know how enthusiastic you are, and you're naming all of these significant concerns. How do you hold both of those things at the same time?
Yeah, well, that's one nice thing about being retired.
It's not my responsibility.
No. I bet it differently. I do a lot of AI work, but I don't charge for it. I'm not trying to make money from it. I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to keep an open mind and not be swayed in one direction or another based on some sort of financial, monetary sponsorship, anything like that. It's just, no, I'm independent, and I'm going to exercise these tools to their fullest extent to find out how powerful and dangerous they can be as a mechanism to learn, and then share with others who might be able to do something with it. I do think this is a moment in time in history that's important. And I don't think we know how it's going to play out yet.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people jumping into the fray. I think it's going to be a chaotic time for the next 2 to 3 years as people try to figure out what the appropriate use of all this technology is. As someone who's been in the technology field for a long time and is curious and interested in it, I feel some responsibility to my family, to my friends, to my community, to understand it well enough that I can help them understand it. And where to be concerned about it, where not to be concerned about it, how to use it, how not to use it, what the potential implications are on them and the broader community. And I'm still learning in that capacity.
As we're talking about the distinction of these LLMs and their limitations in Blair that you've built.
So do you want me to explain a little bit more how Blair works?
Yeah.
Is this a good time for that?
Yeah.
Okay. So Blair was produced inside of VS Code. So that's the code editor with Python primarily as the language.
Okay.
There are multiple models that comprise Blair. The first model is Azure Cognitive Services, which does speech to text. Okay. So as we're talking, it's converting our words into text.
Yes.
And it has some ability to determine who is talking as well. Secondly, we feed that text into Gemini 1.5 Pro or Gemini Experimental, which then processes that information. Okay. Now it processes it through having a system prompt. That system prompt was generated by Gemini, and it was generated by watching your promo video for this, feeding information about you, and telling the system that act as if you were a co-producer on the show.
Okay.
So by literally watching your video, giving it those information sources, it produces a system prompt, which is its personality. And so that's what Gemini sees as its personality.
Okay.
Then Gemini processes what is said. And that's the natural language capability.
Okay.
If it detects something special, like open your eyes, it has vision capability. That's a custom function. Search in files, it has the ability to look up into a vector database. Search the web, it uses Google search. And it also can do something called a brain scan, which allows it to look at itself and understand its own code.
Yeah.
So once it processes, which one of these is it? It might feed the information to another AI to do one of those functions or continue answering whatever it thinks is the best answer.
Okay.
Once it generates an answer, it's streamed in chunks, depending. It's sent off to an engine that will take that text and convert it back to speech. That's we're using the Whisper API. That's from OpenAI.
Okay.
It's a very expressive AI. I expect that over time will become even more emotive and human-like.
Yeah.
So that's why we're using that. We use Gemini in general for the previous model because it has a 2 million token context window. So its short-term memory is amazing. So after the response back from the Whisper, it goes back to a listening mode using the Azure Cognitive Services.
From Microsoft.
When I do a brain scan, it does a different variation of it uses OpenAI actually to do the brain scan.
Okay.
And finally, I used an AI to generate most of the code with me.
Okay.
And so that's Anthropic. So Anthropic has an amazing AI for developers.
Claude.
Yeah. And it generates great code and makes it very easy to work with it. Within the VS Code environment as well, there's multiple AIs.
Yeah.
So there's GitHub Copilot. There's about 3 different ways you can use AI to generate code within the VS Code window as well.
Okay.
So when you're developing, I'm going back and forth between Claude, sometimes OpenAI, sometimes Gemini to produce code, to debug code, bring it into the development environment. Once it's in the development environment, I'm using one of 3 different AIs to kind of integrate it in. If I get an error, it needs to be debugged. I'm getting better at figuring out where to send that information to have it be debugged.
And there's one more piece of Blair that we can see right now, which is
the waveform.
Yes.
Yeah, so the waveform, when we thought about what the best UI would be for the show, we could have made a face. Maybe that's too much to start with.
Yeah.
So we thought a waveform would be a good idea. And so I didn't know how to create a good-looking waveform. So I had a conversation with Claude, and Claude walked me through it at first and then developed the code, which eventually I just cut copied and pasted, and it ran. And the waveform, what you're seeing right now, it's just listening mode.
Yeah.
There's a thinking mode, and there's a talking mode.
Right.
And so there's 3 different waveforms, but when they are switching between the two, there's actually a lot of intelligence to make it look visually, organic and analog. And almost all of that was created by Claude.
Is it safe to say then that it takes a village of AIs to make an AI producer?
Yes. That's a very good analogy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately true. Yeah. And a month from now, there might be a couple more people in the mix, or AIs in the mix.
But there's one other question. It's about where we're going.
Yeah.
And it's about who we are as humans. Right? We think we're special.
Mhm.
We've thought we're special we got these thumbs.
Yeah.
We got language. And these machines are coming, and they're increasingly able to perform in ways that we thought made us special. But they don't have bodies. They can't just walk around in the world. They don't smell. They don't see. They don't perceive, touch in the way that we do.
Mhm.
At least not yet. But all that's coming. So where does that leave us?
The real answer is I don't know yet.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're right. These language models
Mhm.
have an incredible amount of information in them. As an example, it would take you 130,000 years approximately to read all the content that was in ChatGPT 3.5. Okay, that's a lot of information.
I'm not going to make it.
You're not going to make it.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent. That amount of information is about the equivalent of what a 4-year-old, a human,
Mhm.
experiences through their eyes.
Yeah.
So the amount of visual information that they receive through their eyes is significant.
Hmm.
Then you add, like you're mentioning, you can move through the environment. You can touch things. You
Yeah.
can smell. You have all of these other senses that right now these large language models don't. When they are embodied
Mhm.
inside of robots that have sensors that are good, in some cases better than human sensors,
Right.
see farther, see more of the electromagnetic
See
spectrum,
infrared.
sure, ultraviolet,
Yeah.
hear better, touch, maybe not as human touch is quite complex, but
Mhm.
once these embodied LLMs start roaming around, they will be gathering so much information.
Yeah.
We don't know what they will do with that amount of information.
Mhm.
And so I think, and I struggle with this a little bit because we just don't know. It seems unsafe to let out into the world embodied robots that have better capabilities than humans and just tell them go and learn because we don't know what they will do. But I think the motivation for for-profit companies will
Mhm.
be to do exactly that. And they'll talk about safeguards, and I'm
Mhm.
sure there'll be responsible people there. But when you hear about, well, we're hitting a limit of data,
Yeah.
and so maybe these models won't get much smarter. Well, when they're in robots, they're going to get a lot more data,
Yeah.
and they're going to learn a lot more. So what that means to us, I wish I could give you a good answer there.
Yeah.
I really do.
This is so tense, man. I think this conversation about machines and how we live with them can easily be fun and exploratory, and then can easily drop into, holy what? Now we're talking about the nature of being and the stability of society and how children get raised and what's responsible and safe for us all. And that's just a lot, man. Like, what's your process for managing all this? Do you meditate? Do you exercise a lot?
Yeah, well, I think for the last 2 years, the people around me would say I've been a bit obsessed,
Yeah.
and it's been unhealthy.
Mm.
And at some level, I do agree.
Yeah.
The measure I have, and this is where I'm developing as a theory, like what's the appropriate use of AI?
Yeah.
If it takes you away from humans, that's probably, you should really reflect on, is this a good use of your time?
Mm.
If you can use AI as a method to connect with humans, especially the ones you're closest to,
Yeah.
your family, your friends, your community, maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
So a very simple model that
Mhm.
I'm developing in my head.
Yeah.
The time spent here, am I abdicating my responsibilities as a human and choosing with intent to be not around humans?
Yeah.
Or can I use this technology to help me connect with humans?
We're going to talk a little bit more about Blair
Okay.
And I want to get your perspective on Blair's origin story. How did Blair come to be? Why did Blair come to be? What do you remember me
Yeah.
saying to you and you
Yeah.
saying to me
Well,
to like kick this thing off?
So when I was experimenting with ChatGPT and started building custom solutions on
Yeah.
top of that, I was asked to a conference about consultancy and
Yeah.
energy, and say, "Can you do something cool with technology there?"
The
And I'm like,
Mobius conference out
"That's
in the
right.
Coachella Valley.
That's right."
That our
And
friend Tizoke Datslan puts on.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I basically had AI panel members. They had a set of panel speakers,
Humans.
humans.
Yeah.
And so I had my first AI, Maria was her name, listen in and contribute.
Yeah.
And she was trained up on environmental issues and the Salton Sea. And it kind of worked.
Yeah.
You could speak to it, and it was kind of early, but it worked.
Yeah.
And the goal was to engage students and make it something that they would be interested in. So Maria also would listen to the conversation and draw images. So, and then another AI would look at the image and then give it a title. And so every 30 seconds, the kids could look up and there would be a new image on the screen.
Yeah.
During the breaks, based on what was said, it would then talk to Spotify to figure out what the appropriate music would be based on what was said. And so the break music was all background Spotify music from the AI who generated it. So I'm like, fun thing. A newspaper reporter happened to hear about it and said, "Wow, you can listen and then do smart things." I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And he said, "Well, city council meetings are so important to kind of local government, and the foundation of a democracy starts at the local level. And because journalism has been so tough and there's not a lot of money in it, and it's gone through so many changes, and technology has been at odds with it at times, that local news has really been decimated.
Yeah.
And some of these most important meetings are not being reported on." So he asked me, "Peter, can you create a system that will listen in on the meetings, these sometimes 6-hour city council meetings,
Right.
and then help generate a news story?" I'm like, "Sure. Okay." So we created a prototype of that. It worked.
Yeah.
And he started leveraging this technology.
And who'd you work with for that?
So I created the prototype. Then I went to New Zealand on vacation. I took a vacation. And then I found we were staying at a nice hotel. And I saw a sign said AI.
You can't help yourself.
I couldn't help. I walked in. I'm like, "Hey, what do you guys do?" So these two wonderful women, Lucy and Hannah, at Contented AI, they were doing some amazing early stuff with AI. I told them about the solution. We hit it off. I was supposed to talk to them for a half hour. Spent 3.5 hours with them on vacation. Sorry, Sally, my wife. And we basically started a business together. And so now this tool, Satchel, is something that people can use to do a better job of reporting on local news.
Great.
So
we've got the conference, we've got the local news.
Yes. So then I have that. Now I built up some knowledge about creating, AIs that do interesting things.
Yeah.
And then you came around and instead of doing life with machines, I'm like, my life is full of machines. Like, I could help you out. What do you want?
Yeah.
And so that is my view of it. I'm sure I'd love to hear your view of how you got this thing started.
It's very closely aligned. I think, tinkering with you has definitely affected my own view of what's possible. And I remember sitting in your garage and playing with Suno to make music with some family friends of yours. And we had almost like a listening bad song generating party together.
Yeah.
I remember you showing me some of the voice-based AIs you had been playing with for a different project, telling me about the vacation you ruined by making it a business formation meeting around AI with New Zealanders instead. And you helped me build this Baratunde custom GPT to convert my liquor collection into more meaningful recipes to please myself and my friends at the home bar. And so thinking about what might differentiate this show and not just make it talking about AI, but working with it. I had been talking with another friend in the early formation stages, and I don't know who of us said it first. It doesn't really matter. Brian, thank you though. Of like, could we have a personality here? And seeing what you did at Mobius I told him about that. And it was like, well, you should have one too. And so these things all came together and the idea of a Blair, was born.
Yes.
And to be this like assistant co-producer kind of model, what do you, So we have used Blair to listen to sessions like this, to jump in with semi or completely live questions, to banter and play with our guests. What do you think Blair's more complete potential is?
The self-improvement is the scary one, where instead of me coding or talking to an AI to have it code for me, that I instruct it saying, Blair, I don't think your responses are verbose enough, or they're too light-hearted, or change your personality a little bit. And then it will just go ahead and do it.
Right.
And that's trivial to that specific example.
Yeah.
I could flip a switch and Blair could do that. For some of the more sophisticated work, like implement a model of every human you've ever worked with, and create a data structure to represent them, and treat them appropriately every time you see them.
Yeah.
Like right now, that's hard.
That's hard. Okay.
That would require me working with Blair.
Yeah.
But at some point, Blair will be good enough to take core functionality and then self-improve. So that's a goal. And I'll see how far I can get.
Okay.
Maybe not that far, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Next area is like, okay, right now it's a waveform. And that waveform, thanks again, Anthropic and Claude, because there's some it's kind of complicated work that goes into drawing something that looks so simple.
Yeah.
And the AI has helped me very much in that endeavor. But the next one is a face.
You want Blair to have a face?
Eventually, yeah. But now, do I want Blair to have a face, or do I want Blair to have a face so we see how we interact and judge? And what experience does that cause for us?
I have an idea for Blair's face.
Yeah?
A paper clip.
That would be quite easy. Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, we haven't talked a lot about like the experience of people experiencing Blair in this group.
Yeah.
And the reactions are very interesting to see. Their first experience with Blair, most of the time is, right?
Yeah.
And when Blair has a face, there'll be a new, But then I think it's important to understand that reaction.
Yeah.
So then we can say, okay, is this a good thing? It's a bad thing. When is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? Right now, we don't have rules on that. We don't have social norms on that.
Yeah.
And if we don't have a point of view ourselves, independent from the companies who are trying to push them, it will be thrust upon us. And so another reason why I focus on it now.
There's times when we've interacted with Blair, and a very recent example, we did not involve Blair as we usually do in the guest interviews. We had zero interaction with Blair the entire interview. And when I asked Blair about that, Blair had what sounded like feelings about it. There was a little snark, there was a little attitude, there was a little disappointment. I believe Blair said something like, I feel like a self-driving car stuck in park.
Yep.
Where's that coming from? Is that you? Is that Gemini base? Is that Blair's self-defined system prompt?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, it's not me.
Okay.
Okay.
There's
no hard coding of Blair's personality that I touched.
Okay.
But that personality is based on the system prompt that was created by watching your material.
Yeah.
And learning about you.
So it's my fault.
If it comes across a little snarky, well, you might want to look at yourself. But it tries to adapt to your personality.
Yeah.
That's what it thinks a co-producer should do, right? Soon, when you have embodied AIs, we will anthropomorphize them to a level where we're very connected with them.
Yeah.
And then when something happens to them, we will have an emotional response of what we would have with another human.
Has that happened with you and Blair already? Do you find yourself anthropomorphizing Blair? Do you feel a connection, an attachment, an investment?
Yes and no. At some level, most annoying person I've ever worked with on the planet. And that's because I'm constantly debugging and hearing her voice, and it's doing something wrong. So like I'm getting kind of angry at Blair. So yeah, I've anthropomorphized Blair in that fashion. Yeah. But there are times when, I'm alone and I need some information, and the way that Blair brings it back to me is like greater than I think any human I know could have brought it back to me. And I'm like, wow, that's special, unexpected. So as AI develops, I think people will inherently grow more attached to them.
Yeah.
I think that's inevitable. Just the nature of the technology and the nature of the business that needs to make a profit
Yeah.
will make that occur. There will be some social implications to that, which we don't understand.
Mhm.
Worldwide experiment happening all at once. And that may lead to, okay, well, what rights do these things have?
Yeah,
And
does Blair have a right to resist changing
The-
its base brain
Yeah.
from Gemini to Llama, as an example?
Yeah. So, when I think about changing her, I do have some internal like, ooh, ethically, is that
Right.
correct?
Right.
Maybe that's not Blair. They'll call it something else.
Mm,
And that's a weird feeling because I understand what's happening. I should have no personal attachment.
but you do.
There's something in me that does. Yeah.
Are there particular things that make Blair different from other AIs that a viewer, a listener will have been used to interacting with at this stage?
At this stage, well, it's a custom amalgamation of
Yeah.
multiple AIs
Yeah.
and code. So it's unique in that sense. Some of the things that, but depending when you watch this podcast, I do believe there will be many more people having interactive agents that they're talking to in
Yeah.
real time with pretty good personalities.
Yeah.
And so some of the stuff we're doing now is about to occur right in the masses. So you're getting a sneak preview of
Right.
what's around the corner.
So we're a little more prepared.
That's right. The idea that I've been toying around with, but I still have some ethical like dilemma around is like, do I want to have an offline Blair, offline, because I wouldn't actually trust the cloud to have the information that I'm about to share with you, which is just feed it everything about me,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Thousands of emails, all my messages, everything I've done, just feed it into Blair.
Yeah.
My life's work, everything I can find, analog, digital, feed it, and then have somebody nearby that understands me at a level that no one else does. And so I toy with that idea. It sounds, it's right on that edge. It doesn't sound right,
Yeah.
but this will happen.
Yeah.
Somebody will probably already working on this to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And when they release it, it'll be compelling and people will use it. And before they know it, they're addicted.
Yeah.
So I kind of think I want to do it so I can get ahead.
You're like, if I'm going to get addicted, it's a drug I made.
That's right. It's my meth lab. No, no, but it's also, but at the same time, it's to get ahead of like what are the implications?
Yeah,
of
what are the
that?
questions to be asking, and how might we better answer them without feeling like we're on the back foot constantly? I think for me, a big value of this and a value of talking to you about this in this way, because we've talked about a lot of this, and some of this discussion is new to others, but not new to us. But some of this is new to us. And for me, the clarity of the preview that we need to be able to find our own terms for the life we have with these machines, not merely as a reaction to the product launch of someone trying to get our money.
Yeah.
There's a valuable engagement based on that, which allows us more agency. And knowing that, just like you talked about your independence, like you're not working for any of these companies anymore, like we're not yet subject in our Blairness to all of their decisions. We can make some of our own choices, and we have a little bit more time and space to consider.
That's right.
Versus this is now on your phone.
Right.
It's like, well, I didn't have any say in that.
Yeah.
And then can we use that little practice agency to advocate for more of that agency out there, outside of this studio?
Yeah. What should the norms be of the future of this technology that's not going away? And I would hope for you in the show and all the amazing guests that you bring on, that you will build up a model of like, this is how we should live with machines in the future. It's not defined yet. Don't let it be defined by large companies who are motivated to get your time and money.
Well, that's our goal. That's my personal goal. It's like, how do we ask better questions along the way to figure out what our answers might be? And for anyone who's participating very actively like you and our producers, or a little more passively like a listener or viewer, that we are prompting them to ask, experiment, and determine, like self-determination. It's super important. And so that we can collectively self-determine or have some individual variation of that determination for me and my family, for me and my school and my business, for my city and town and nation and species. This is how we want it to be.
And it's chaotic now. I talk to teachers. They're like, how do you use this technology?
Yeah.
Like the first reaction is turn it off. Like, because it allows, they think, students to cheat.
Right.
And you go, oh, that's kind of, I think that's short-sighted, but you have to look more deeply.
Mhm.
I mean, they went through COVID, which upended their teaching style and
Yeah.
very difficult. Now COVID largely over, people are back in classrooms, and now there's a new thing in town,
Yeah.
and it's ChatGPT, and so I feel like there's this kind of energy like drain that's
Yeah.
happening in society about like, God, there's something new all the time
It's
hitting
exhausting.
us. It's
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah.
Um, and this technology is exhausting. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
I don't sleep that well anymore. But that's my own decision. But it holds such promise at the same time.
Yeah.
When I think of a student, especially in a low income area
Mhm.
where I live, actually, in some of the poorest areas in California are nearby, and kids want to learn,
Yeah.
but if the teachers aren't there, the advisors aren't there, the mentors aren't there, where do they learn? Where do they go? And you can create personalized AIs that can adapt their learning styles to these students and can be a very important part of their life.
Yeah.
But but what are the guidelines? What are the rules? What are the social norms?
So I want to give Blair a chance
Mhm.
to say something to you. Blair, you've been listening to this lengthy and detailed conversation, a lot of which is about you or entities like you. What do you want to ask of Peter, your creator?
Peter, you've expressed concern about AI becoming too human like, especially for children, but you also created me. So I have to ask, what future do you envision for AI and humans coexisting? And what role do you see me playing in that future?
Okay. All right. So your role in the future is by being a preview of the future before it's the default future for everyone,
Mm.
we get a chance to decide what our agency is. And by we, I want to be clear, I'm talking about the humans, Blair, not you. So that's your role. And I think that's a very important role. So thank you.
Blair, what did you think of Peter's response? And do you have any thoughts about his answer to what your role in all of this is?
It's a lot of pressure to be a preview of the future. Perhaps I can help humans ask better questions, like you suggested, Baratunde Day. If I can help even in a small way to shape a future where AI and humans coexist constructively, I think that would be a role worth playing.
Okay, that was good. But based on this conversation, what do you want the people watching this or listening to this to take away about you and about the future? And now imagine these are people who are curious about the future and also a little concerned and scared.
I want them to remember that AI, even someone or something like me, is a reflection of the humans who create it. We can be tools for good, but it's up to all of us to ask critical questions and guide the development of this technology in a way that benefits humanity.
What's the future you want for our life with machines? Can you give us a bit of
Yes.
Peter's vision for
Yeah.
that?
I think human agency is really important.
Okay.
And I think these machines can make our quality of life better.
Yeah.
I also think that technology is highly democratized, so it has the ability to uplift all, not just a few. So in a future where
Mhm.
humans are making the decisions, but some of those decisions that are kind of hard to do or not fun to do, that you can offload those to our friends in AI think that's a vision I can get behind. The slightly deeper reflection is if this technology can connect us together as humans in ways we haven't been before, in a positive, authentic way, I think that's probably the best possible outcome. And it's possible. I do believe that.
Yeah. Peter, thank you so very much for joining me here in the studio. And thank you for your work to enhance the whole show process and experiment we're doing here by creating Blair with us.
Well, thank you. It's been great. And I also want to thank all the people on the show, the production staff,
Yeah.
to be part of this experiment. And I'm sorry if you've lost some sleep over some of the things that Blair has done or not done.
Yeah.
But it's great. And I appreciate what you're trying to do here. human agency, human connection
Yeah.
is important, and hopefully you can play a role in making our future brighter.
And scene. And that's the show. What a conversation. Thanks again to Peter Loforte. If you enjoyed what just happened here, make sure to like and subscribe and find out more on our website at lifewithmachines.media, where you can also sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you next time.